Hello and welcome to Speak Out on Strangles, the Strangles Awareness Week podcast, which aims to give horse owners a real insight into preventing and managing the disease. Strangles is the world's most commonly diagnosed infectious disease in horses. Although cases can go from mild to malicious, it is extremely contagious and can have devastating consequences for people passionate about enjoying life with their horse. Strangles Awareness Week is supported across the equestrian industry in the UK and across the world, and it calls for more openness and support for people and premises affected by the disease. With these podcasts, we aim to inspire open conversations about strangles and what helps in taking us closer to eradicating the disease. I'm your host, Gilly Rydent. I'm the Campaigns Officer for Redwings Horse Sanctuary and Coordinator of the Strangles Awareness Week. With the gradual reopening of events and recent outbreaks of equine herpes virus, taking your horse out again can seem both exciting and daunting. This is particularly true for event venue managers, Shirley and Abigail, who will be talking about how approaches to equine biosecurity have changed and why strangles is always in the back of their mind when planning an event. Please don't forget to subscribe, whether you are listening on YouTube or on your podcast player, to get the heads up about future episodes and, more importantly, share them with your yard, coach or vet. Let's spread the word and not the disease. Here today with us on the Strangles Awareness Week podcast, we are lucky enough to be chatting with Shirley Melling, who is the yard manager at the Scottish National Equestrian Centre. Thank you for being with us today, Shirley.
Hi, thanks for inviting me.
Would you like to tell our audience a little bit more about yourself?
So my role here at the Scottish National Equestrian Centre is to be yard manager to the horses that are used by the college. I've been here for almost 9 years now, looking after both horses and students. Very full-time job, really busy, but love it. Really good job.
Our other guest is Abigail Turnbull. Her and her husband Andrew run the Richmond Equestrian Centre, which acts as a livery and also an event venue. Welcome to the podcast, Abigail.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
What comes to mind when you think of the word strangles?
So first and foremost, I always think back to the time that we had a bit of a strangle scare here at the college in 2016. I just remember it caused us a lot of stress, a lot of worry, and it really kind of opened my eyes to how much of a stigma kind of surrounded the whole word strangles. It is something that I'm quite passionate about, and having been in a situation where I've had fingers pointed at us, but coming out the side stronger, it's just something that I really like to talk about and get involved in and try to help educate people a little bit more. We did come out of it much better than we started, so that's the first thing that kind of springs to mind when I think about strangles.
And you, Abigail?
I think taboo is probably one of the biggest words. It's still very much a scary word, and people are frightened of it, and they don't want to admit to having it, really.
Shirley, can you summarise for us the different types of events you hold at the Scottish National Equestrian Centre and how frequently you hold them? Under normal circumstances, of course. What biosecurity challenges do they present?
So here we have competitions on in normal times pretty much every weekend. I think we only ever have maybe 1 or 2 empty calendar weekends in a normal year. We host a wide variety of shows. I'm not actually the centre manager, but it is literally just across the car park from us. And here we run British dressage, British show jumping, we have NPS showing shows, we have the huge big show that is the Scottish Home Pony Show, we have vaulting competitions, we have western shows, and we have pony club and riding club competitions and club days as well. So there is always something on. It's quite a busy place, and each of them kind of brings its own different kind of issues along with it. So for instance, British show jumping, there's a lot of kind of standing about in a holding area waiting for the next person to go and jump, and so there is the kind of scary thought that all these horses' noses are lined up along the kickboards of the arenas. possibly making contact with another horse's nose that's already been there. Each of the different types of competition have got kind of similarities, but in other respects you've also got, for instance, the NPS showing day, where they may have a judge riding everybody's horses. And when you start to think into things like that, you think, well, that person's wiped their horse's nose clean, ready for the judge to look at it, and then the judge has maybe shook hands with that person and then got on the horse and held that horse's reins. So there's lots of different factors that you maybe don't initially think about, that each individual competition has something that makes you think about it.
And Abigail, how about Richmond? What sort of events do you hold, and do they present any particular biosecurity challenges for you?
Okay, so we run British eventing twice a year here, and we run regularly, monthly British show jumping, British dressage, as well as lots of unaffiliated competitions. We run clinics, we have external hires, where the centre's hired out to different people, and within that we have overnight stays of horses. So there are a lot of biosecurity issues which we have plenty of signage out, and it's it's trying to educate people on biosecurity, not letting horses say hello and touch each other's noses. And a big thing here is the first thing people will do is get the horses off the wagons, take them to a nice patch of grass to eat the grass, and you don't know who's been there before, and that's how these things get passed around, things like strangles. So yeah, there's a lot of challenges out there, and it's just trying to educate people and to tell people. And there's a few times we've said don't let your horses graze, and people must look at us like, really? Because I used to, before we had the strangles, that if we'd go to a competition somewhere, it was just get the horses off, give them a leg stretch, let them have some grass. So it's things like that, just trying to teach people that grass could be contaminated by a previous horse that's been eating it, that was a carrier or had strangles or any other equine disease.
And why is that awareness of strangles and biosecurity so crucial for equestrians venues like yourself?
Well, obviously it'll have been September 2019, we had the outbreak here. We still don't know how we got the outbreak. The horse that developed the strangles initially had been on box rest for 6 months. Because of that outbreak, it was just over 2 weeks before our horse trials. Although a lot of people in the equine world told us that we shouldn't have said anything, we decided to go public, and we lost the horse trials because of that. But there was just no way we would have ran an event when we had an outbreak of strangles on our yard. And it's just so important for people when they're visiting venues like us. This is our livelihood. It's also, people were upset because they couldn't come here. The arenas and everything was closed for, I think it was about 8-9 weeks altogether. So you've got to be pragmatic about it, and you've got to be on the ball with it.
It sounds like it can really have an impact on your business.
Oh, absolutely, massively. Not just financially, but the worry and the stress. I think at the time we had about 30 horses in livery. There was only 4 other horses that developed strangles. They'd all kind of been quite near each other. Several of them had had nose-to-nose contact because they thought it was cute and nice. So just shows you one horse that has it, that could be a carrier. Another horse comes along, they touch noses, say hello, and the next minute the other horse has strangles, and it just carries on and on and on, and just like COVID-19.
On the subject of COVID-19, do you think that the pandemic has changed attitudes on biosecurity in general and in the equine community?
I think it has, but how long that stays topical, I think as COVID starts to, hopefully, the vaccines come out and deaths are reducing, and hopefully it does eventually die down a lot more, then I think the same will happen with good biosecurity. That's why it's just really important for us to keep it at the forefront. we don't have a problem if we see an issue. You know, we don't have to be nasty about it, but we'll just say overnight stays do not go through our livery yard, because as well as horses passing diseases on from horse to horse, it can also be on people as well. So for instance, everybody on our yard, all our clients, before they sign the contract, they all have to have taken the Stamp Out Strangles pledge. That also goes for any farrier, any dentist, any physio, any vet, any feed person that comes onto the yard, nutritionalist, anybody that comes to Richmond on our yard has to have taken out the Stamp Out Strangles pledge, and they have to be aware. And we try and instill that into competitors that come here as well, overnight stay people. So yeah, we just try and, like, without being awful, it's just we've been educated on it, and it's there's no reason for it not to be talked about.
When you started out, were there some challenges you hadn't thought you'd ever have to face when you first started doing events?
I don't think there were, no. The biggest challenge to us, it's not a problem. We always cleaned out the stables, sprayed them after use and everything. The biggest challenge has been not the horses or anything, the hard work. It's been trying to educate the people, owners, whether the competitors, horse owners. It's just trying to get it through how, especially now with us having COVID-19, it's so topical because it just shows you how infection can spread.
What do you think, Shirley? Have you found any challenges you weren't expecting?
Yes, so kind of we stable for shows here as well. So we have competitive stabling, and we do keep our stabling separate from our own college horses. One thing that I didn't really think about at the time was the fact that the arenas are just across the car park, a stone's throw away from our college stables. And quite often people will come across to look for a tap to get some water. And if they can't find a tap, they will come into the yard. And on the way to looking for someone to get water, they will pat a horse. So yeah, that's a big thing that we didn't really think about at all. The other thing, and my own kind of naivety as well, I initially, before I read lots and lots of stuff about strangles, thought we'll get away with disinfecting a stabling bed and the next person can use the bedding, when in actual fact that's probably not one of the best ideas. So emptying beds and disinfecting and just being extremely thorough, there's a lot more to it than I initially thought, definitely.
Thank you. What happens if a visiting or competitor horse arrives and they have signs of strangles? How do you deal with it?
So we've been lucky enough that we've never actually been in this situation, thankfully. If it was to happen, we would obviously keep the horse separate from any other horses in the vicinity, although I dare say it may have already made contact with some other horses. We would call the vet, we would speak to a vet, ask their advice. We do have a kind of protocol in place that we would be able to move the horse to an isolation area, but somewhere where it is still able to see other horses. Even though nothing would have been confirmed at this stage, I do think it's a good idea. We would phone and let other people that have been stabling in that same area to let people know what has potentially happened, so that they can speak to a vet and get their best advice really, before they potentially go to another place and pass anything on at all.
How about at Richmond, Abigail?
Yeah, well, any overnight stays have to fill in paperwork. It's pretty much a tick box exercise, but they have to declare that the horse is not had any illness in the last few months. They have to give us details of where the livery yard that they're at or their address. We need to see copies of the horse's passports to check the vaccination. So we are quite on it in that respect. If we ever did imagine that a horse that was staying overnight here was unwell, I think the first thing we'd do is probably isolate it away from others. I mean, we do have an overnight stay yard, which is just for overnights. It doesn't impact on our livery yard. But we'd probably isolate it somewhere else and call the vets, take its temperature.
Shirley, you mentioned that the Scottish National Equestrian Centre holds a really large variety of events. So you must receive lots of different people with different levels of understanding of biosecurity. How do you make sure that biosecurity rules are respected by everyone?
We certainly put lots of hand sanitizer units here, there and everywhere, even before COVID, just to try and encourage people to use them, because it's just natural, isn't it? You walk down a yard and people want to just pat every horse on their way down. So we try to put hand sanitizers in both ends of the stable blocks. We have foot baths in the visiting stable block as well, at the front and the back end, so the horses and people can walk through and actually walk through the foot baths as well. It's just like a big kind of sponge mat filled with one of our favourite disinfectants. So that's probably the biggest starting point that we try to make people do as well. We do also encourage them to empty their bedding when they're leaving at the end of a show, and a lot of people do say that is a huge waste. So we tell them if they want to take it away with them, they're more than welcome. It's their bedding and they've paid for it. But if they don't want to take it, we ask them to empty the beds, and still people don't always want to do it. So we do, unfortunately, tell them that they will be fined £5 per bed if the bed isn't emptied. And we're just trying to insist on a good biosecurity. It's not that we're trying to make money out of it. It's just to try and keep everything as clean and safe as possible.
Abigail, how do you manage to get your biosecurity messages to such a variety of competitors and visitors to your venue?
Well, as well as signage that we've got up, and we're also very vocal on social media. If there's ever a Strangles outbreak nearby, which has been notified, if the yard or wherever have notified people that they have it, we kind of advertise that as well, and just say to people, if you're bringing a horse to Richmond, please, if it's not itself, if it's got a temperature, just double check everything, and if you're a bit concerned, don't come. Just like if you've got a bit of a cough or a cold or a temperature, and especially with COVID, don't come. But we are very, very active on social media in that respect, and we get a lot of people that do have Strangles outbreaks that contact us for advice. Some people say, oh well, with Strangles, I think it's everywhere to an extent. It's just some people will notify others that they have it and some people won't. So we try to make it at the forefront, one of the forefront things at Richmond all the time.
How can people who attend your events make your life easier as an event organiser?
I think if they read the rules here that are quite clearly laid out, and if it's going back to the Stamp Out Strangles pledge again, but if you read the details in there and just think about what you're doing, and just like us with the COVID, it's so topical and so relatable. Just keep your horses away from others. Don't let them graze. Don't let them touch other horses. Don't share feed buckets or water buckets. Don't bring a horse, let it have a look around our livery yard. I mean, it's very difficult to get onto our livery yard, but we have found a couple of people before having a look around without permission. Just, be sensible.
Yes, absolutely. I think emptying beds is a really, really good thing, and it makes our life easier because we can just go in then and use a fogger or a good disinfectant, a strong spray, and let the beds just be empty and refreshed for a while. Another good point that would really help us out was for people to just be sure that they're keeping the horses in the correct areas that they're meant to be, not straying into unauthorised zones. Just for their own peace of mind as well, keeping horses away from the edges of arenas so they're not potentially picking up any bacteria that may have already been wiped on the boards. And another really good point as well on the fact I was making about bringing water. To bring their own water would also, one, save them a walk to try and find a tap that might not be there, but it would also save them having to make contact with a tap that several other people may have been in contact with as well.
So following the equine herpes virus outbreak in Spain and its current impact on events around Europe, what do you think people should take away from this?
So I think people should take heed of what has happened, especially this year after the whole pandemic that's been surrounding us for a year now. where nobody's actually been able to go out and compete much in the past 12 months. I would like to think that it'd make people realise that they could potentially lose out again if they don't maintain good biosecurity, and instead of humans this time it's going to be horses that are on a lockdown. It also just shows how quickly and easily things could potentially get out of control. A little bit like the whole COVID situation, really. I think in some senses, having had the COVID, it's kind of shown us that we need to kind of be, overall, horses and humans, more careful with our biosecurity and hand sanitize more and keep cleaner and, you know, just look at what we're doing, really. It's just it's been really noted this year how things can spread so easily, and if people continue to hand sanitize and look after themselves from now on, it would be a huge positive to the equestrian world as well.
Again, it's back to biosecurity. Don't ignore it, and don't think that if your horse doesn't seem very well, just leave it a few days. It might get over it. Especially if you're on a mixed livery yard. If the first sign that your horse isn't acting itself or has a temperature or anything like that, get in touch with your vet, and don't take it somewhere else where if it does have something that it's not going to potentially pass it on to another horse, because it's just a vicious circle and it'll just spread and spread.
What would you like to see in the future when it comes to strangles management?
So I think hopefully looking forward there'll be less shame surrounding strangles and people being less embarrassed about having strangles on a yard. I'd like to see a lot more caution from owners, people practicing better biosecurity, which in turn should hopefully start to lead to less cases everywhere. I would also like to be able to sit down and educate our students regularly as to why I'm constantly on at them to sanitise their hands, clean their boots, not pat strange horses when they go to and from the arenas. Our students do weekend yard duties, and so at their lunch times they're quite keen to go over and watch show jumping or dressage, and so they leave the yard, they go over, they grab something from the burger van, pat a couple of horses on the way over potentially, go and watch some show jumping and come back to our yard to groom our horses. So I'd really like to be able to sit them down and just talk about why I'm making these rules and just show them how easily things are spread. It'd be really good to try to get them involved as well in the Strangles Awareness Week for that fact alone.
How about you, Abigail? What would you like to see in the future management of strangles?
Well, hopefully there might be a vaccine coming out there eventually. But it's so difficult because so many people and so many horsey people brush it under the carpet, say that we'll never get rid of it, it's here to stay, just let it run its course. We just need to be a bit more sensible and grown up about it and responsible. And that is down to individuals and just, again, educating people on how to deal with it. And I know, again, over lockdown, so many people that weren't particularly horsey would think, I'm going to buy a horse, didn't know about farriers, vaccines, physios, dentists, or anything like that. And I know now there seems to be a lot of horses that have been sold on for quite a lot of money and probably gone into the wrong hands.
And do you think that's one of the reasons we get so much stigma around strangles? People don't understand the disease and they just simply don't want to talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they've been told by professionals, if you like, that don't worry, if your horse has got strangles, put it in a field for a couple of weeks, it'll sort itself out. And it doesn't work like that. It will sort itself out, but if that horse becomes a carrier or it's passed it on to other horses, yeah.
Were you ever worried, after you had your outbreak, were you ever worried that the participation and the engagement rates for your events was going to go down? Because something we've seen with strangles is that people are really afraid that their yard or their equestrian centre is going to be kind of red stamped with that reputation of having had strangles.
Oh, absolutely. People told me point blank when we put it out there that we were going to have to close. We've got an outbreak of strangles. people contacted me obviously to cancel events and things and told me that they'd never come back to Richmond again if we've had strangles, and just ridiculous. And what just not doesn't make me laugh, but what astounds me is that strangles it's not just at the places that admit that they've got it, it's at so many other places and yards, and it's not a notifiable disease, so you don't have to say anything. But yeah, a lot of people at the same time respected us for coming out there and saying it. We had probably 800 horses ready to run our September horse trials. And the thought of even one of those horses picking up strangles just because we decided not to say anything and let all those people come, that would have done our reputation more damage than anything. So just had to bite the bullet, take the loss and tell everybody what had happened. But since all that, I think we've gained a lot of respect. People have become more vocal about having strangles, especially in this area. And I think people come to Richmond knowing that our biosecurity is really good. And I think they probably feel better coming to Richmond because they know that there's probably not a chance in hell that we do have strangles or anything like that here, because we are so on it.
How has culture or norms changed in relation to strangles and people's attitudes to it?
I don't think there's quite the same bad stigma as there used to be. I think people are slowly becoming more aware that it's something that we need to talk about, and not hide away and shush, don't tell people we've got strangles at the yard. A lot of people used to think, oh, it won't happen to me. People are a little bit more aware now, I would like to think, certainly from what we see at SNEC. We had a lot of people pointing fingers at us and saying, oh, don't go there, they've got strangles. And we actually didn't even have strangles. We had just been kind of as honest as we could be and said that we had noted a horse had slight raised levels of the antibodies that are associated with strangles. And because we put that word out at the time, it was, oh no, everybody, they've got strangles. But I think now people are beginning to get more educated and start to realise, well, okay, it's maybe not as bad as it seems. We just need to keep ourselves very safe and follow the biosecurity rules, really.
And that leads us really nicely into our last question. Why do you think it's important that people get involved in Strangles Awareness Week?
I think it's really, really good for people to be able to share stories, because there's lots of us out there, and lots of us, whether we've had strangles or we just know someone that has, or we've had a scare. I think it's really nice to be able to listen to other people and get some ideas from them, some top tips possibly on their biosecurity measures, something that maybe we're not doing that we could do to help us out, and hopefully we could pass something on to them as well that would either help them to cope with an outbreak or hopefully even prevent an outbreak from happening. I think it's quite a good thing for everybody just to make people feel like they're not alone and they're not the only one that it's happened to as well. And it's another really good way to find out about joining a scheme, whether it be the Past Strangles scheme or the Redwings scheme as well. And all these things are really, really good to try and help people, encourage people to come to their yard and stay. It's a good thing to have a certificate like that on your wall. It makes people feel a bit more relaxed about coming and having their horse at your place. I just think it's a really good week, full of lots of kind of take-home information, both in written form, in video form. There's some fantastic Redwings cartoon videos out there that I frequently watch and I keep showing to everybody. And yeah, you can listen to other people's stories, which in turn helps you feel a bit easier and breathe a bit easier, knowing that you've got people that know exactly what you're going through.
I just think it's an ideal opportunity where we can actually think about strangles and think about the horse, think about your horse, and just think about COVID and how it's affected us a lot. Just think how strangles can affect the horses. So it's an ideal time to take out the Stamp Out Strangles pledge, promote Strangles Awareness Week, campaign about it, and do something about it. And if that can just help one horse from prevent getting strangles, then it's great.
Thank you very much to both of you for your time. It's been a pleasure chatting to you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. It's been fun.
Thank you so much for listening, everyone. Follow the Strangles Awareness Week Facebook page for more information about Strangles and the campaign. Or if you have any further questions, leave a comment or get in touch with us by emailing campaigns@redwings.co.uk. We will see you tomorrow for our next episode, available on YouTube or on your podcast player. Let's spread the word and not the disease.